Hello and welcome to the Championship Talk podcast. I'm your host Paul O'Toole, and not joined with me is my co-host Thomas Falco. It looks like it may be a couple of weeks before we can make our schedules fit so that we're able to record. And I know Thomas has been eagerly wanting to talk about the Championship and what's been going on, because there's so much that seems to happen week to week. He has been doing his notes, he has been watching all the games, so he's been keeping up to date, but he's just to record at the same time is becoming a little bit frustrating, but that should hopefully make itself a little bit easier in the coming weeks. So apologies for that. So you just have to listen to my voice, unfortunately. But we're going to start with probably the biggest and really only news talking point since I last recorded, and that is Sheffield United have sacked Stanislav Jokanovic, and they've appointed Paul Heckingbottom as manager. Stanislav Jokanovic was appointed on a 3-year deal in May. He oversaw 22 games in charge. However, obviously Sheffield United, with the team they've got, they want to be, they probably would have saw themselves as playoff contenders. Certainly they would have wanted automatic promotion. As I say, he was appointed in May. His sort of 6 months tenure hasn't really worked out. I don't think Sheffield United have played a really attractive brand of football, given the players they've got, given the certainly attacking players they've got. I think they probably were stuck in a mould from Chris Wilder, and they would need to change a significant amount of their squad to move away from that. So they've appointed Paul Heckingbottom. He's promoted from his role as under-23s manager, the former Barnsley and Leeds United and Hibernian manager was placed in interim charge following Chris Wilder's departure at the end of last season. Sheffield United were obviously relegated from the Premier League. They currently sit 16th, which, let's be honest, with the players they've got, that's not good enough, on 23 points. In a club statement, they've a decision to part company for several months of a strategic planning and lackluster start to the season. So it gives you an idea of what their thinking is going forwards. And then obviously we look forward to embarking on a new era in Blades football with Paul at the helm. Paul possesses the personal leadership qualities and technical football skills the board feel is essential to successful implement of the board's strategic directives. He shares our values and interest in player development, while also possessing the ambition and determination to get the most out of our current squad. I think that's the key thing there, to get the most out of our current squad. Now that indicates no wholesale changes in terms of players. That indicates work with the squad you've got. If Jokanovic was to have been successful, I think that he would have needed to have changed a lot of players to change that style of football to a more style of football that fits him. I think appointing Paul Heckingbottom, especially promoting him from within the club, is going to make sure that they're using the resources that are available. They've probably got some big players on some big wages, and let's talk about where the transfer window is going to go. When it opens in January, we're not going to see players moving for fees. We're going to see clubs wanting to reduce their wage bill. We know what's happened at Reading. We know what's happened at Derby. We know other clubs are tightening their budgets in terms around player wages. So to get rid of players that are on 2-3 year contracts is going to be difficult. There's no way about that. There's no two ways about that. You're going to find it hard to offload a player unless that player is playing particularly well. And I would say that none of them Sheffield United players are currently playing very well. So that's the only way to move out of that situation, make those players either more attractive to other clubs, or put yourself in a position where you're contending for promotion and ultimately get promoted. You need to make sure you're making the most of those players. And I think that's an interesting quote from the chairman, Yusuf Gianskaranka. I just think Paul will play a leading role in improving all aspects of football operations. They're putting a lot of faith in him, and I think they're going to make sure he's given current resources available, and he's going to be a sort of a central part of what they're doing going forward. He was interim charge. They've put him in as they've appointed him on a contract till 2026. So that shows where they see that progression. And when you look at teams like Brentford, and you look at that, Thomas Frank wasn't a manager brought in. Thomas Frank was a under-23s manager, a reserve team manager. They promoted within. They didn't then recruit a whole host of players. He worked with that team, and some of the players he's then subsequently brought through were players that he worked with. Look at the England setup. Gareth Southgate worked with the under-23s. The players that he's currently working with and that he trusts are players that he took to tournaments before getting England. And I think that type of management is going to be what we see from clubs going forward. Some clubs will do it differently. Just look at Barnsley. Some clubs will look elsewhere and they'll look for managers that fit a model but come from that are proven in other leagues, because it's always a risk if you take a manager that's inexperienced. In Paul Heckingbottom's situation, he's not inexperienced. I think that what Sheffield United have done is they've shown that they want to work with their existing talent, not bring a manager in 6 months a year, change the squad, change the manager again. That's not a good business model. And then when we look at, we look at Derby and we look at teams that are financially struggling, finance plays an impact on the business model you ultimately look to put in place. So if you have to pay a compensation to bring a manager in, if you then have to pay him a salary, that's a risk. If he then wants to bring his backroom staff in, if he then wants to change a number of players or doesn't, can look to that as a reason why he hasn't succeeded, they are all risks. Promote a manager from within, he's already worked with the players, he's going to have his ideas, because I think if you think of the world that you work in, any job that you work in, think of when you've had a change of your manager, your line manager, your area manager, whatever it is. They've always come in, they've always had their own ideas. Think about jobs you would go to if you were to be promoted in your company. Think of the changes you would make. Football's the same. Even though someone has worked with the same group of players, they will have their own way of doing things. Not a single person, I would hazard a guess that not a single person has ever been promoted and gone, I'm going to keep things exactly as they are. I'm not going to change a single thing because it's working perfectly. Because ultimately, if it's working perfectly, you wouldn't have got the job in the first place. So I think that's going to be an interesting development. Doesn't always work out, and we can point to a lot of clubs where this hasn't worked out. I think Sheffield United and Sheffield United fans, I would imagine you've all tapered your expectations to, if we are within a shout of the playoffs with 5 games to go, we take that. Because right now, with how you're playing, that's probably not going to be that's a long ambition off. However, when you look at the gap between where you are and playoffs, it's very, very small. Go on a run of 10 games and you're probably laughing. And I think that's what the Sheffield United board have looked at here. So this was the biggest news story, absolutely without a shadow of a doubt. So, thank you all for watching. As always, if you want to support us, hit us up on our main podcast feed where I'll be reviewing the 2 rounds of fixtures that have just happened. So week 19 and 20, and there's some cracking goals. Also a lot of 0-0 draws. So yeah, that's any kind of podcast subscription service. Check us out at Championship TA1, where myself and Thomas often retweet things we've seen, usually stuff that's sent to us by you, our audience, which is amazing. And always, if you want to support us, hit us a like, hit subscribe, and as I say, we'll be doing this weekly. Hopefully we'll get to a point in the new year where it's myself and Thomas every single week, and it's always good to hear a different opinion. At the end of the day, myself and Thomas known each other for so long. We argue about football tremendously. We have different opinions, and often we can change each other's opinions, which is also really good. But one thing we both agree with is the Championship is one of the best leagues in the world, if not the best league. So, thank you all for watching, and I shall speak to you all next week. Goodbye.